The year is 1888, a year that would forever change the course of Brazilian history. Across Brazil, whispers travel on the wind, whispers of hope, of change, of freedom. The air is thick with anticipation and the promise of a new dawn. For centuries, the institution of slavery has stained the soul of the nation, but on May 13th, a new chapter begins. The weight of history presses down, but the spirit of change rises. Princess Isabel, acting regent in her father's absence, signs the Lei Áurea, the Golden Law, abolishing slavery in Brazil. Her pen strokes echo the cries of millions who yearned for freedom. This momentous act, the culmination of years of struggle and sacrifice, finally brings an end to the brutal system that held millions in bondage. Celebrations erupt, but the journey has been long and arduous. The Lei Áurea was a watershed moment in Brazilian history, yet it was not a simple act of benevolence. It was a hard-won victory, a testament to the resilience and determination of countless individuals. The pressure for abolition had been building for decades, fueled by the moral outrage of abolitionists, the economic interests of foreign powers, and the unwavering resistance of enslaved people themselves. Each force played a crucial role in this historic change. The road to abolition was long and arduous, paved with the blood, sweat, and tears of countless individuals who dared to dream of a better future. Their sacrifices laid the foundation for this pivotal moment. The signing of the Lei Áurea did not magically erase the deep scars of slavery. The wounds of the past remained, a stark reminder of the nation's troubled history. It did not dismantle the structures of racism and inequality that permeated every facet of Brazilian society. The struggle for true equality was far from over, but it did mark a turning point, a moment of profound transformation that reverberates to this day. The signing of the Lei Áurea was a beacon of hope, signaling the beginning of a new era. The fight for true equality, for a society where the legacy of slavery no longer casts its long shadow, continues. The journey is ongoing, and the spirit of those who fought for freedom lives on in the hearts of many. The story of slavery in Brazil begins long before the signing of the Lei Áurea, the law that officially abolished slavery in 1888. It begins in the 16th century as Portuguese colonizers, hungry for labor to exploit the vast riches of the New World, turned to the African continent. They sought a workforce that could endure the harsh conditions and grueling labor required to build their new colonies. Millions of Africans were forcibly removed from their homes, their families, their cultures, and thrust into the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. Entire communities were torn apart, and the social fabric of African societies was irreparably damaged. The journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, was a nightmare of unimaginable cruelty. Packed like cargo in the dark, damp holds of ships, the enslaved endured weeks of suffering. Cramped into the holds of ships, chained together in the darkness, subjected to disease, starvation, and unimaginable brutality, many perished before ever reaching Brazilian shores. Those who survived were often scarred for life, both physically and emotionally. Those who survived faced a life of forced labor on sugar plantations, in gold mines, and in the homes of the wealthy. They were treated as property, with no rights or freedoms, and their lives were marked by relentless toil and suffering. The slave trade was a monstrous enterprise, driven by greed and fueled by the dehumanization of an entire people. It was a system that thrived on the exploitation and oppression of the most vulnerable. It left an indelible stain on the history of Brazil, a legacy of pain and injustice that continues to shape the country today. The repercussions of this dark chapter are still felt in Brazilian society, influencing its culture, economy, and social structures. The echoes of the Middle Passage can still be heard in the stories passed down through generations, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. These stories are a testament to the strength and endurance of those who survived and their descendants who continue to honor their legacy. The human spirit, however, refuses to be broken. Even in the face of unimaginable brutality, the enslaved Africans and their descendants in Brazil never surrendered their hope for freedom. Resistance took many forms, from individual acts of defiance to organized uprisings that challenged the very foundations of the slave system. Throughout the centuries of slavery in Brazil, quilombos, communities formed by escaped slaves, dotted the landscape. These havens of freedom, often hidden deep in the forests and mountains, offered refuge and a chance to rebuild lives shattered by slavery. The most famous of these quilombos, Palmares, led by the legendary Zumbi, stood as a beacon of hope and a testament to the indomitable spirit of resistance. Resistance was not limited to the quilombos. Slave rebellions, large and small, erupted throughout Brazil's history. These acts of defiance, often met with brutal reprisals, were a constant reminder that the desire for freedom burned brightly in the hearts of the enslaved. The fight for abolition was not simply a struggle waged by enlightened individuals and organizations. It was a struggle waged by the enslaved themselves, a testament to their unwavering belief in their own humanity. While the enslaved themselves were the true drivers of their own liberation, their courage and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship cannot be overstated. The path to abolition was also shaped by the actions of individuals and organizations who recognized the inherent injustice of slavery and fought tirelessly for its end. These abolitionists, both within Brazil and internationally, played crucial roles in advocating for the end of this inhumane practice. The abolitionist movement in Brazil gained momentum in the 19th century, fueled by a growing awareness of the horrors of slavery and the influence of international pressure. Public gatherings, demonstrations, and the spread of abolitionist literature helped to galvanize support for the cause. Among the many figures who emerged as champions of abolition, Joaquim Nabuco and André Rebouças stand out. Their dedication and relentless efforts were instrumental in pushing the movement forward. These men, through their writings, speeches, and tireless activism, helped to sway public opinion and put pressure on the Brazilian government to act. Their eloquence and passion inspired many to join the cause and fight for justice. They understood that slavery was not just a moral abomination, but also a stain on the nation's soul, hindering its progress and development. The economic arguments against slavery also began to gain traction, highlighting how the institution was holding back Brazil's potential. The road to abolition was paved with a series of laws that chipped away at the institution of slavery. Each legislative step, though often met with resistance, marked progress towards a more just society. The law of 1831, while largely unenforced, declared the transatlantic slave trade illegal. This was a significant, albeit symbolic, step in the fight against slavery. The Eusebio de Queiroz Law of 1850 effectively ended the importation of slaves into Brazil. This law marked a turning point, as it cut off the supply of new enslaved individuals from abroad. The law of the free womb in 1871 granted freedom to children born to enslaved women after that date. This law aimed to gradually phase out slavery by ensuring that the next generation would be born free. Finally, in 1885, the law of the sexagenarians declared that enslaved people over the age of 60 would be freed. This law acknowledged the harsh realities faced by elderly enslaved individuals and sought to provide them with some measure of relief. Each of these laws, while imperfect and often implemented with reluctance, represented a step towards the eventual abolition of slavery. The cumulative effect of these legislative efforts, combined with the relentless activism of abolitionists, ultimately led to the end of slavery in Brazil. The abolition of slavery marked a significant turning point in history. But, the journey was far from over. Freed individuals now faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives in a society that was still rife with prejudice and inequality. Many, despite their newfound freedom, struggled to find stable employment and secure a place in a world that had changed so drastically. The legacy of slavery continued to cast a long shadow, influencing social, economic, and political landscapes for generations to come. It was a time of both hope and hardship, as the fight for true equality had only just begun. In the journey of humanity, there comes a time when we must confront the shadows of our past. It's not just about acknowledging the pain and suffering, but about learning from it. Only by facing these truths can we pave the way for a brighter, more just future. Each step forward is a step towards healing and growth. Amidst the trials and tribulations, there are always beacons of hope and resilience. These symbols remind us of our strength and capacity to overcome. They stand as testaments to our enduring spirit, guiding us through the darkest times and inspiring us to strive for a better tomorrow. The fight for equality is far from over. It requires our continuous effort and unwavering commitment. Every voice raised, every action taken, contributes to the larger movement for justice and fairness. Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. As we conclude this journey, let us carry forward the lessons we've learned. Let us remain steadfast in our pursuit of truth, justice, and equality. The road ahead may be long and challenging, but with unity and perseverance, we can build a future that honors the past and embraces the promise of a better world for all.